Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Singing for Survival, the Capoeira history podcast. This is Desconfiado. I want to thank everyone who tuned in to the last episode on Lampiao. I put a lot of research into that episode, and I hope that you were able to learn something from it, because I certainly learned a lot in the process of researching it all. So what I wanted to do for this episode is do a little bit of a follow-up on the subject of Lampiao and the sertao, and go over a couple questions that came up, not only from people who sent them in, but also some questions that I had in my mind coming away from that episode. And around all of that, of course, I want to tie in a song that I think is really relevant for what we're going to talk about. So this is a song completely about the sertao, about the culture and the life in the sertao, which is, I think, really crucial to understanding the conditions around which Lampiao emerges and why he was the kind of popular folkloric hero that he was. So this is a recording of my good friend Mestre Máscara at an event in Asia. So let's have a listen, and then we'll talk about it.
Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Vocês. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Seu doutor, meu lugar é a Caatinga, região que o governo mais despreza, onde o pai de família muito reza e a mãe de família menos xinga, onde um copo de água de moringa vale muito dinheiro no verão. Lá tem trigo de mar pra fazer pão e batata de imbu fazer cocada. Minha roupa de couro alaranjada é a prova que eu venho do sertão. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar e eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar e eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. A piscina que eu uso é o barreiro, o transporte que eu tenho é meu cavalo, o relógio eu posso a voz do galo, que canta madrugada no puleiro. Meu herói predileto é o vaqueiro, o meu ídolo incansável é Lampião, o meu mito é Padício e Silvorrão, entre as festas eu prefiro a vaquejada. Minha roupa de cor alaranjada é a prova que eu venho do sertão. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Seu tapete eu garanto não sujar, um assunto em seu carro nunca peço, brevemente eu estarei de regresso, no momento eu só quero escapar. Se o senhor permitir eu vou ficar por aqui arranjando meu pirão, fico até de vigia em seu portão, para a sua mansão não sofrer nada. Minha roupa de cor alaranjada é a prova que eu venho do sertão. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar, não me leve pro mar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Beleza?
So I really love this song. It feels really good to listen to and to sing, and it has so much information in it. It's a really, a lot of capoeira songs and samba songs, they try to tell stories or teach lessons through allegories, or many of them are a little difficult to interpret. But this kind of song is just very explicitly describing life in the sertao. And it really, when you look into the lyrics, especially in the verses, it really paints a detailed picture of what life was like for those people. So the chorus of this song is saying, just don't take me to the sea because I don't know how to swim. So, centering ourselves in the really dry, arid inland region of the sertao. And it talks a lot about things that we talked about in the sertao in the last episode, where of it being very a bare existence, essentially. So if we look at one of the verses, the pool I use is a mud pit. The transportation I have is my horse. For a watch, I have only the voice of the rooster when it sings at night on its perch. My favorite hero is the cowboy. My undying or untiring idol is Lampiao. My legend is Padre Cicero Romão. And for parties, I prefer rodeos. So it's much more fun to say in Portuguese, but what we're talking about is a bare, rural existence, which is what the reality of life was in the sertao. And I should mention also that the very last line, which is kind of the line that leads into the chorus after each verse, is my clothes are made of tan leather, which is the proof that I come from the sertao. And that's something we talked about when we went into the fashion of the cangaceiro, was head to toe in leather, and it was to protect against the thorny underbrush, the cachiga, which is also mentioned in this song. That was kind of omnipresent in the sertao. So I think this song gives a really nice window into life of the sertao in a way that's not it's not sad, it's not remorseful. It's a very upbeat song. It's very kind of like tongue-in-cheek through the whole thing, which I think also talks to the resistance and the hardened nature of the people in the sertao, that they were subject to a very hard way of life, but they took that on kind of head first. And again, I want to emphasize that I think it's important for us to get this perspective of life in the sertao, and of what people's attitudes were there, because it helps us understand why Lampiao was as important as he was, why he was able to come to power, and why we still talk about him today. Lampiao did some really terrible things. He was a very cruel person to his enemies, and he was a criminal. Yet the local populace did not see him that way, and a lot of the interpretations of him today don't see him that way. And it's the conditions of the people in the sertao and their relationship with the government, the way they were treated, that I think leads us to this. And this is something we see not just with Lampiao, but with a lot of other characters through history, inside and outside of Brazil. So with that, I'd like to get into the couple of questions that I have here, and just share some things that I've picked up in the week since the last episode. So one of the questions that came up was from my brother Dave, about what kind of special connection that Capoeira has with Lampiao, or if it is just the fact that he's a symbol of resistance. And this was a really big question that I had in my mind while I was doing this research, because most of what I could find was talking about Lampiao from the perspective of just Brazilians in general, not necessarily from a Capoeira perspective. So with some conversations that I was able to have through that research, it seems that it is primarily the fact that he is a symbol of resistance, as is Capoeira in Brazilian culture, but also that there's a lot of crossover between different cultural expressions within Brazil. And this isn't unique to Brazil. There's plenty of instances of kind of crosstalk between cultures in other regions. But if we want to focus in on how we see it in Brazil, you can even see it in football, in soccer. So a fundamental aspect of capoeira is the ginga. The ginga is the sway, it's the dance, it's where all the movements in capoeira come from. It's the base that we build the foundation of capoeira on top of. And Brazilian soccer players and soccer teams also talk about the way that they play soccer in terms of the ginga. Pelé, in particular, in plenty of interviews, explicitly talks about ginga in his way of playing soccer and in the Brazilian team's way of playing it. So there's clearly, some sort of cultural mixing between those different sports, between soccer, between capoeira. So it makes sense that there'd also be mixing of other cultural aspects, especially a figure as important as Lampiao was, which, you can see from the depictions that exist today. So my brother's girlfriend, Laís, who comes from João Pessoa, told me that when she was a kid going up through public school, they would dress up as Lampiao and Maria Bonita going into school someday, like one day a year. So it's clearly a persistent symbol even to today. So something that's that present in Brazilian culture, it would make sense would have some bleed over between the different activities. In addition to that, you kind of see the same thing in samba. So samba is everywhere. There's specific sambas to region. There's specific sambas to activities, and capoeira has samba as well. And it's this like shared aspect of culture that we see across these different activities. So that's kind of the reason why Lampiao is also important in capoeira. I know it's not a really definitive answer, but it's more just Lampiao is a symbol of Brazilian resistance, as is capoeira. So capoeira absorbs him into that sphere. So another question that comes from my brother is, what happened to cangaço after the death of Lampiao? And this is a really good question because Lampiao is clearly the most influential person in cangaço, and we don't really hear much about it after his death. And from what I can find, Lampiao's death essentially signaled the decline of that practice of banditry. So one of Lampiao's lieutenants, Corisco, tried to take over the position as head of his bandit gang after Lampiao's death. And he did this for about 2 years. However, he wasn't really the leader that Lampiao was. So the band just continued to decline while Corisco was in charge. And in March of 1940, the Volantes, the state authorities, then fought with Corisco and the remainder of the band, which seriously wounded him and eventually led to his death in a hospital. So with the death of Lampiao and then subsequently the death of Corisco, the Cangaceiro band essentially dissolved. So I think it's fair to say that the death of Lampiao signaled the end of the maybe not the end, but at least the steep decline of cangaceiros as a practice. So the last thing I want to share today was something that I kind of stumbled upon when I was looking through some primary documents. It was a magazine that was popularized around the late 70s and early 80s that was named after Lampiao. The magazine itself was called Lampiao da Esquina, though it was supposed to be a bit of a tongue-in-cheek reference to Lampiao himself. So what's interesting here is this magazine was focused on and became the foundation of the gay rights movement within Brazil. So Lampiao was referenced here because he is often considered a very hyper-masculine hero in Brazilian cultural history. So this magazine took on his name as they pushed for the rights of, at least at first, primarily gay men in Brazil. And this publication eventually led to the formation of Somos, which was a group of a group pushing for homosexual rights in Brazil. It was their first gay and lesbian rights organization in São Paulo, and this also encouraged the formation of other groups throughout the country. So I just thought that was an interesting thing to find as I was doing my research, and wanted to share it with you all here. So that concludes the questions and things I wanted to share, including that really, really nice song for today's episode. Again, if you still have questions about Lampiao or even Zumbi, feel free to always send them to me. My email is in the description. I'm more than happy to go back and fill in gaps or look at things that I may have missed along the way. As I go forward with this podcast, I'm realizing that uploading, once a week or even once every other week is really not practical, just for the fact that it really takes a lot of research in order to address these topics in a way that I feel is satisfactory. So for the next 2 episodes, and I'm not sure which one is going to come first, I'm going to be looking into present-day quilombos in Brazil, and I'm also going to be looking into Dandara. So we'll see which one comes first, but it's going to take a little bit for me to finish really answering all of the questions that I have before I'm ready to present it to everyone here. So stay tuned for these two. I'm really, really looking forward to releasing both of them because I think we can have a lot of really good discussions, both about the conditions in present-day quilombos, how they're being treated by the current government of Brazil, and then looking at our other topic, I think talking about how we value Dandara in the history of the quilombos of Brazil, of Capoeira, is really important, especially when you compare how black women are often treated compared to men as historical figures. So I think we have a lot of interesting discussions to come. I really hope you all stay tuned. And as always, feel free to send me emails with suggestions, questions, or comments. With that, thank you for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.
Não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Meu lugar é a Caatinga, região que o governo mais despreza, onde o pai de família muito reza e a mãe de família menos xinga, onde um copo de água de moringa vale muito dinheiro no verão. Cê se lava o cuna pra fazer pão, de batata de umbu fazer cocada, minha roupa de cor alaranjada, e da prova que eu venho do sertão. Não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar que eu não vou, porque eu não sei nadar. Não me leve fumar, não me leve fumar.
não sei nadar.